Graffiti is not the problem. It's your perspective of graffiti that is the problem. Ever since the inception of graffiti, people have always had this predetermined vision of it, of vandalism and corruption and deterioration of the city streets. Even Mayor Koch, back in the inception of the modern graffiti, had a thing to say about this. He wished that he could put wolves in the tunnels where they were doing graffiti instead of just dogs and barbed wire, because he thought it wasn't enough. But let's face it, painting murals, painting on walls is one of the oldest forms of art, and it's been around forever, as long as we've been around anyway. My job here is to show you how we view this art and how it's been perceived as a negative thing. Also, I want to show you that the problem is not really with the graffiti artists, it's also with the reaction to the cityscape and how we live in the city and how it's a reaction to us. And let's face it, everyone likes graffiti. This is going to be my baseline for my talk. Do you see a problem with this? Anyone? No graffiti, right? The problem here is this is what we are akin to. We're organic creatures living in an organic world, except when it comes to architecture. There's a definite problem that occurs in our cityscapes. We see around us, we're bombarded with straight lines. We have straight lines everywhere. If you look around you, all around here, there's straight lines. If you start counting them, you'd probably go insane. So we're in direct confrontation with nature, with the linear aspects of the city. This probes a deeper problem within us because we see where we're going. And this is where graffiti comes in. Let's do this hypothetical situation. Imagine you have a job where you have to commute an hour a day to go to work, 5 days a week. Unheard of, right? And you have this job and you only work 40 weeks a year. You guys are saying that's awesome, I want that job. And let's say you, after 20 years, you retire. I know you all want this job. But in that time, that's 175 and a half days just traveling. Let me rephrase that. 175 and a half days where you're subjected to your surroundings. You have absolutely no say in this. You ride your commute either by car or by bus or whatever. You're subjective to your surroundings. So you're subjective to aggressive advertising that telling you your lifestyle is not great, sexism, sexualized advertising, voyeurism, pedophile fantasies, all for the sake of advertising. And see, what do? We focus on the graffiti. The graffiti is not the problem. Let's go back to my baseline. Oh, yeah. But people say this is impossible. We live in a city. How could we possibly do this? Everything has to be structured. Everything has to be linear. It's the best way to package us into our coupes. I mean, houses. And there's no possible way we could do this. Luckily, there are advanced thinkers and artists that chose to do this. So one of my favorite architects, his name is Friedrich Hundertwasser. I love that name. And he confronted this over 50 years ago. He confronted this problem. He thought that the straight line was the decaying center of a foundation which we built our society on, and he fought it. He also introduced a lot of modern technologies like rooftop gardens, like compost toiletry, not really popular yet, but if you look at this building, if you looked at it from a satellite view, you would see nothing but green, and you could walk all the way up to the top and have a picnic. So we could say the graffiti got our viewpoint against the walls. That we see the walls now, and we see what's happening. Our focus is centered towards walls, and we start a criticism and a dialogue with it. I started doing graffiti a long time ago, and I was absorbed by it. And unfortunately, at this time, there was no community for it except for graffiti artists. We were all alone in our little world, painting, and we were confronting it. So this is the basis for the background of why we started doing it. And luckily, someone appreciated it, and I had a show. I was able to put some art in a gallery and sell some works, but by no means it was a viable means to support myself or to live. It was introduced at this time in 2002, which was a long time ago, and I sold a few paintings and it was fine. but that's where it ended. A couple of weeks later, I had a fire and I lost everything. I don't know why I laugh, but it's a bad thing. It's a horrible thing. I lost everything, but my friends were sympathetic and they held a show and they raised funds for me to rebuild my life, which I did. I had the option of getting an apartment or buying furniture or something like that, but I chose not to, and I chose to travel. So I traveled through the Middle East and eventually ended up in Asia. And I did what any normal graffiti artist would do, started painting. So I started painting there and introduced graffiti to a country which is roughly the same population as Canada. And we were about 12 graffiti artists at this time, and we started painting. We had a crew, and we painted everywhere, and I introduced, I don't know if you could see it, it's right there. It's a little busy, the area. And I kept painting, and at this time there was still no scene, but I think it was developing in the background. People were becoming aware of what was happening with graffiti. During this time that I was painting, I was able to send works back to Canada to have sold. Once in a while I'd get requests, but still no means a method of supporting myself. And I kept painting. People liked it. People liked the idea, because graffiti, I just want to point out, this is for the mayor of Taichung, a city in Taiwan. He was really taken by our art, so he really liked it, so he hired us. So I kept painting, but I just want to point out a little factor. I'm going to give you a lot of tidbits throughout this talk so you can take home and explain people what graffiti really is. Graffiti is not illegal. Graffiti is not illegal. It's not illegal like cocaine is illegal. You can't have a little cocaine around. You can't have a little heroin around. Graffiti is not illegal. It's the act of putting something on someone else's property without their permission is illegal. Because you wouldn't see graffiti-style t-shirts, you wouldn't see graffiti-style canvases if it was illegal. Back to this. So I painted this and I sent it back to Canada, and it sold. And it sold to a rather influential human being. He was the president of Cirque du Soleil. So this means that the attention that graffiti wanted is it's increasing in scope. It's becoming larger in scope, and people are recognizing it more. I came back to Canada eventually, after 5 years, and I did an interview, and this was on a national newspaper, and it seems that it was gaining the recognition it needed. But I wanted to go further, so I wanted to get into a gallery. So I used this as an opportunity. What I did was I approached the gallery that's mentioned in this article, and I said, I want to have a show. And they said, who are you? And I took this article and I went, bam, on their desk, and I said, that's who I am. And they're like, okay, let's have a show. So the interview was over, and I had a solo show. And, and at this point, something also coincided. I was able to have art sold, and I sold out the show. And it was very successful, and I was able to, at this point, focus more on painting, on real painting. Also coincided with another event, which made me, kind of forced me to stop painting in the streets. I was arrested, and I was tried, and I had to pay my dues. Those dues that everyone talks about were paid in full. So, but at least I was able to get a recognition, and I was able to push the movement of aerosol painting and graffiti forward. So I was able to do contracted work. I was able to do paintings inside. I was able to do mural contracts, and eventually it grew larger and even larger in the circle of influence. And eventually, you could say it entered the art world. It entered the art world, and it's one of the fastest growing forms of art and one of the most recognized forms of art in the world today, starting from lowly graffiti. That's not my end of my talk, though it would be nice. I'm here to give you a freebie. The question that haunts every person who has the chance to talk to a graffiti artist. What's that question? I love your stuff, but what's with the tagging? Everyone asks me that all the time since I started. It's like, I really like your stuff, but what's with the tagging? I'll give you a little rundown. First of all, we're not art critics. No one, maybe there are a few, sorry, but a majority of us are not art critics. If I were to show you this and say, do you know anything about this? Does anyone know who this is? Okay, so this is an artist named Cy Twombly. He's a famous artist, believe it or not. This is an adult, and this he sold this painting for $9 million US. Okay, but you know, that's accepted art. So let's just play a hypothetical situation, shall we? Suppose it's New York, mid-70s, two artists are hanging out. Michelangelo and Mr. Picasso are hanging out. They're like, yo, I really want to paint something today. It's like, oh, but man, we can't paint. We don't have much money, and there's no place that likes us. I don't care, man. I'm going to paint anyways. So what is Picasso? You know, he's a rascal. He goes and he throws up a tag, and like, what is that? That's not you. That's you. I know you could do better than that. Hey, I had 3 seconds. So here's what it is, you know, and it's like, oh, there's a human behind this. Literally, there's a human behind this. And so you see that you see the essence of what he's doing. You see the essence of the person that we're talking about. We see the essence of Picasso. Give him some time. What happens is he has time to produce something beautiful, something with meaning. So that's what happened since the inception, through my journey as a graffiti artist. I started off, it was illegal. There was no future. I was risking life and limb, court dates, cops, beatings, whatever, chases, to get my art up. Because I couldn't stand the city the way it was. I didn't like it. I found it too linear, and there was something we could do. I put a face on this world, and I also made it possible for future generations to come along and say, like, hey, I'm a graffiti artist. I want to have a career doing this because I think aerosol is a valid medium. And now I think I've made that way, and people like me have made that way, and people are interested enough that there's a future. So basically, if you believe in something strong enough and you think it's for the betterment of humankind, just do it. Thank you.